Have you ever felt the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the air, the subtle shift in a gaze, the hesitation in a voice, and wondered, why do I feel that someone close to me is preparing a blade for my back? Imagine, for a moment, standing in a grand hall of power, surrounded by allies who smile, who nod, who swear loyalty, yet behind those eyes lies a calculated betrayal waiting to strike. It is a question not of paranoia, but of perception, a question every ruler, every strategist, every survivor must confront. How do you discern the silent signals before loyalty fractures into treachery? Humans are not always what they appear to be. We wear masks, we weave words to hide the shifting of intentions, and the first step in mastering survival is seeing the truth behind the mask. Machiavelli, in his cold and unforgiving analysis of human behavior, would remind us that betrayal is as natural as ambition itself, as inevitable as the turning of seasons. Those who plot against you will seldom announce their intentions. They will whisper them in gestures, in omissions, in patterns too subtle for the untrained mind to detect. It is here, in the silent theater of body language, in the invisible currents of thought, where the first warnings emerge, waiting for a mind keen enough to notice. Consider the way some speak, not what they say, but how they say it. Words are weapons, but so too are silences. A person who once offered unguarded honesty may begin to hesitate, may shade truth with half-truths, may pause when asked a simple question. That pause, almost imperceptible, is a shadow cast upon the wall of your perception, a shadow signaling internal conflict or concealed intent. Observe the eyes, the hands, the subtle twitch of a smile that fails to reach conviction. There are those who study you, who catalogue your reactions, who learn your weaknesses as meticulously as a general surveys a battlefield. They are not enemies yet, but they are preparing, and the signs are there if you can train yourself to recognize them. Machiavelli would advise, study these nuances. Do not dismiss small inconsistencies as trivial. They are the threads from which betrayal is woven. The careful observer, who notes the seemingly meaningless shifts in tone or demeanor, is the one who survives when others fall. Yet betrayal is rarely a single act. It is a sequence of behaviors, a series of invisible maneuvers, like water slowly eroding stone. Watch for the subtle withdrawal of attention, the quiet absence when opportunity arises, the selective listening that isolates you from information. Those who intend to betray you often stop sharing fully, offering fragments while reserving the rest, letting you build castles of confidence atop foundations of sand. And here is the cruel precision of human deception. They will often appear more loyal in moments when scrutiny is highest, feigning warmth or exaggerated devotion, while the silent sabotage continues unnoticed. This duplicity is not mere mischief, it is strategy, a psychological war in miniature, a test of your awareness and resolve. Even trust itself can be weaponized. Some will cultivate your confidence to disarm you, to lull you into a sense of security that becomes a cage. In these moments, subtle gestures, hesitated agreement, fleeting eye contact, contradictions hidden in the cadence of speech, become premonitions, warnings that something fundamental is shifting. Do not ignore them. The greatest danger lies not in overt conflict, but in the hidden erosion of loyalty. Machiavelli teaches that power is both shield and sword, and to guard it is to observe constantly, to read between the lines where others cannot, to sense the movements of ambition before they crystallize into action. Human nature is relentless, unpredictable, and often cruel. Betrayal is not an anomaly. It is a possibility embedded in every relationship, a shadow that grows when left unexamined. Those who fail to see it are like rulers blinded by ceremonial pomp, who stumble when the knife is already drawn. Those who succeed, who survive the hidden assaults of others, are those who learn to interpret silence as clearly as speech, deception as clearly as truth, and the faintest tremor as clearly as a roar. And so the first silent warning begins not with an overt act, but with subtle shifts in demeanor, the smallest gestures, the faintest contradictions. It begins in the spaces between words, in the hesitation before a response, in the incongruity of expression and intent. If you can attune yourself to these signals, you gain a glimpse into the inner workings of the mind that seeks your downfall. You see the architecture of betrayal forming in real time, the scaffolding of ambition and envy that may soon collapse upon you if left unchecked. Betrayal is a reflection of human desire, a mirror of fear, envy, and ambition. It is rarely born from hatred alone. More often, It grows quietly from opportunity and discontent. Observe who hesitates to celebrate your victories, who offers faint praise while withholding admiration, who shows discomfort at your growing power or influence. These are not crimes yet, but they are indicators, silent tremors of shifting loyalty. And remember, the human mind is capable of justifying almost any action. Those who will betray you often believe or convince themselves that their act is necessary, inevitable, even righteous. They cultivate rationalization alongside opportunity, creating a dangerous mix of intent and excuse that moves with precision when the moment arrives. The first warning is subtle, but it is unmistakable to the trained eye. Watch for the departure from patterns that once defined behavior, the invisible cracks in what you believed was steadfast loyalty. Observe who aligns with your influence when convenient, who withdraws when observation is lightest, who smiles when you are present but speaks differently when absent. These are the indicators of silent calculation, the quiet mechanics of a mind that may one day act against you. And now, consider the unspoken hierarchies that exist around you. People measure one another constantly, consciously or unconsciously assessing threat, opportunity, and advantage. Some will measure your weakness, others your value, and some, quietly, will calculate their own rise at your expense. Those calculations are invisible until the moment of action, yet their traces exist in behavior, in micro shifts of posture, in fleeting emotional responses, in the subtle tightening of a smile or the slight hesitation in delivering information. To ignore these is to invite disaster, to perceive them is to gain a preemptive advantage. This is the theater in which Machiavelli lived and wrote, a world where power is fluid, loyalty conditional, and betrayal inevitable. Understanding the silent warnings of betrayal is not merely about self-preservation, it is about mastery of human behavior, about anticipating moves before they are made, about seeing the hidden lines drawn in every interaction. Those who can perceive these silent tremors hold the first advantage, for knowledge, when applied decisively, becomes a weapon. The mind attuned to betrayal sees patterns where others see chaos, reads motives where others see only courtesy, and deciphers intent where others perceive only coincidence. And so, the first warning is here, quietly whispering to those who choose to listen. Observe, always observe. Listen to the silences, watch the hesitations, decode the inconsistencies. The world of human ambition is rife with actors, and only by discerning the unspoken cues can one hope to navigate the treacherous currents that surround them. This is the first step, the awakening to the invisible threats that exist in every relationship, in every alliance, in every circle where trust is assumed but not guaranteed. To miss it is to court disaster. To perceive it is to step into the mind of Machiavelli himself, learning the cold, strategic truths that govern loyalty, power, and human behavior. The second warning is quieter still, more insidious, and yet more telling than the first. It manifests not in words, not in the overt gestures that betray intentions, but in the subtle recalibration of priorities. Observe carefully. The person who will betray you begins to shift the focus of their attention. What once was shared, your victories, your struggles, your private thoughts, becomes compartmentalized, delivered selectively, filtered through a lens of self-interest. They no longer walk beside you in the full light. Instead, they skim along the edges, present in form, absent in intent. Their allegiance, once assumed, fractures silently, leaving only the faintest cracks, imperceptible to the inattentive eye, but undeniable to the mind trained to detect deception. In the theater of human ambition, this recalibration is the prelude to action. Those who betray do not leap immediately. They prepare, they isolate, they manipulate the environment to serve their own ends. Watch how they measure your reactions, how they test the boundaries of your patience, how they note the limits of your perception. Every question they ask, every observation they make, is a probe, a strategic inquiry disguised as curiosity or concern. Machiavelli would remind us that the mind of a schemer is like a battlefield mapped in meticulous detail, every move calculated, every ally a potential tool or threat. The betrayal is not spontaneous. It is a design, an architecture of self-interest erected quietly while you remain unaware, enthralled by the illusion of stability. The second warning exists in the subtle withdrawal of shared knowledge, in the careful selection of what they reveal, and in the increasing invisibility of their true motives. Consider the dynamics of envy and ambition. Humans are social creatures. yet they are driven by self-preservation and desire for advantage. Those who intend betrayal often allow envy to fester, to blend with calculated strategy, producing a lethal combination. They smile when you succeed, but their smiles contain tension, a slight tightening at the corners of the mouth, a pause in celebration, a subtle reframing of your achievements as inconsequential or easily overshadowed. This is not mere malice, it is the incubation of opportunity. Machiavelli observed that ambition without opportunity is frustration, and opportunity without ambition is wasted potential. Those who betray you cultivate both in silence. Now, pay attention to alliances, to the shifting loyalties in the periphery. People do not act alone. Betrayal is often a networked endeavor. The person who intends to betray you begins to cultivate other voices, other sympathies, quietly ensuring that their future actions will be supported, excused, or at least understood by those around them. They sow seeds of influence in whispers, planting doubt, reshaping narratives, subtly undermining your position while appearing compliant, cooperative, even loyal. The second warning is the soft gathering of these forces, invisible yet measurable to the perceptive observer. You may notice that your confidants no longer speak freely, that information travels unevenly, that certain facts arrive late or not at all. These are not coincidences, they are the architecture of betrayal, the invisible scaffolding being assembled around your absence of vigilance. Observe the gestures that betray internal calculation. A tilt of the head, a pause before responding, a shift in tone when discussing your plans or successes, all are signals. Those who intend to betray you are masters of concealment, yet perfect concealment is impossible. Human behavior leaks truth through inconsistency, contradiction, and subtle repetition. They will occasionally let a slip of opinion escape, a glimpse of true alignment with ambition that diverges from loyalty. These slips are faint, like shadows at the corner of vision, but if you are attuned, they reveal the growing divergence between their presented self and their actual intent. And then there is the third layer, emotional manipulation. The would-be betrayer often seeks to destabilize you psychologically before they act, creating doubt, eliciting overreaction, and fostering dependency. They offer counsel tinged with misdirection, support laced with conditionality, and praise punctuated by subtle criticism. Each interaction is a test of your awareness, a measurement of your psychological resilience. Machiavelli would call this a necessary observation of human weakness, a calculation of vulnerabilities. A mind unprepared, unaware of the shifting dynamics, will misread loyalty for safety and generosity for weakness. The second warning is inseparable from these manipulations. The shift in attention, the strategic withdrawal of transparency, and the quiet orchestration of influence. Study their consistency over time. A betrayer rarely changes abruptly. Instead, they evolve subtly, like a river carving new paths beneath the surface, while the world above sees only calm water. Notice how their commitments fade when they conflict with personal gain, how their availability contracts when your demands increase, how their enthusiasm wanes when recognition is not immediately directed toward them. These are not trivial observations, they are indicators of where allegiance has shifted and where intent has solidified. Machiavelli understood that power is not merely seized, it is observed, maintained, and exploited through careful recognition of such behavioral patterns. Consider trust itself, now reframed as a tool of insight rather than comfort. The betrayer relies on the predictability of human kindness, the assumption that others will not suspect duplicity. They calculate the extent to which they can exploit your patterns, knowing that you will interpret friendliness or openness as loyalty. Machiavelli would urge the practitioner of strategy to turn this expectation against them, by observing and measuring, by noting deviations, by converting apparent normalcy into signals of intent. The second warning is the subtle realignment of attention, a preparation of the mind and environment for eventual action. Those attuned to it do not merely survive, they gain the upper hand before the first overt act occurs. And then there is the third element, information distortion. A betrayer will begin to filter what you hear, ensuring that the narrative that reaches you is slanted to their advantage. They may omit critical details, emphasize inconsequential ones, or introduce ambiguity to create doubt. This distortion is not obvious to those untrained in observation. It requires the patient reading of patterns over time. the mapping of discrepancies between what is said, what is done, and what outcomes ensue. Machiavelli's insight here is timeless. Control of perception is as crucial as control of action. The person preparing to betray does not simply act. They craft reality to soften their eventual strike, ensuring that when the time comes, your defenses are already compromised by subtle misdirection. Notice the fourth dimension, relational recalibration. They begin to subtly reorient their social bonds, creating distance where proximity once existed. Friendships, professional ties, confidences. These are reallocated, not arbitrarily, but strategically, to fortify their position and weaken yours. The betrayals of human nature are rarely spontaneous eruptions of spite. They are meticulously arranged sequences, with each step invisible unless scrutinized. The second warning lies in this quiet repositioning of relationships, a silent scaffolding that supports the eventual collapse of your assumed security. And yet, perhaps most chillingly, the betrayer begins to rehearse contingency in silence. They anticipate your reactions, preempt objections, and prepare plausible deniability. Every action is calculated not only for gain but also for immunity. This preparation is imperceptible, yet omnipresent. Machiavelli understood that foresight is a form of power, and the mind that plots betrayal is as strategic as any general planning conquest. The second warning is thus a combination of withdrawal, realignment, information control, and the quiet testing of emotional and cognitive boundaries. To perceive these is to glimpse the architecture of potential treachery. Before it crystallizes into action, the second warning whispers across the landscape of human behavior, hidden in gestures, in omissions, in selective engagement. Those attuned to it can trace the faintest tremor in loyalty, the imperceptible recalibration of desire, the subtle orchestration of influence. And so, the observant mind begins to map betrayal not as an event, but as a process, a sequence of psychological and relational adjustments that converge invisibly until the moment of action. Those who ignore this process, who rely on superficial indicators of loyalty, will awaken to betrayal too late. Those who understand it, who watch, analyze, and interpret the currents beneath social interaction, gain the advantage that is the essence of Machiavellian mastery: awareness, anticipation, and preemption. The third silent warning emerges in the subtleties of contradiction, in the dissonance between what is said and what is done. It is not always obvious, not always loud, yet it resonates with a clarity that only careful observation can detect. Those who prepare to betray do so through layers of misalignment, small inconsistencies that ripple through their behavior like a barely audible hum beneath a symphony. They agree with your plans, yet their actions undermine them. They praise your ideas, yet their efforts sabotage execution. They appear present in the moments that matter, yet their attention drifts when the stakes are highest. This is the third warning, the quiet fracture of alignment between word and deed, between appearance and intention, a fracture that, if ignored, can become a chasm of betrayal. Notice how they respond to scrutiny. A person who will betray you often reacts defensively when questioned, not with anger, but with subtle avoidance, deflection, or overcompensation. They may offer explanations that are unnecessary, rationalizations that do not solve the core issue, or shifts in focus to minor grievances while leaving major concerns unaddressed. This is strategic. The mind plotting treachery must maintain a facade, and in doing so, it reveals cracks. Machiavelli would note that the careful strategist observes not just overt actions, but reactions. 4 reactions are rarely staged as meticulously as intentions. The third warning is written not in what they reveal, but in how they reveal it. The rhythm of speech, the hesitation before a response, the fleeting expressions of discomfort that betray their inner calculations. Pay attention to consistency over time. Loyalty is a pattern, betrayal is a divergence from it. A person who intends to betray you may remain outwardly consistent for weeks or months, yet small deviations will begin to accumulate. Perhaps a promise is delayed. Perhaps a commitment is half-heartedly fulfilled. Perhaps a once constant ally becomes absent at critical moments. Each deviation alone might seem insignificant, but together they form a map of shifting intent, a trail that, when read correctly, illuminates the trajectory of betrayal. The third warning is the accumulation of these dissonances, the subtle departures from expected behavior that signal an internal realignment towards self-interest at your expense. Observe the manipulation of narrative, Those preparing to betray you often control the story in subtle ways, shaping perception without overt confrontation. They may reinterpret past events, reframing mistakes or misjudgments to cast you in a negative light, or they may exaggerate minor failures of others to elevate themselves. These narrative shifts are imperceptible unless one is attuned to the broader context of relationships, history, and behavior. Machiavelli teaches that perception is as vital as action. Those who manipulate it quietly gain a tactical advantage, predisposing others to accept betrayal when it arrives. The third warning is thus the distortion of narrative, the quiet reshaping of reality to suit the future act of treachery. Emotional calibration is another vector of betrayal. A betrayer studies your responses, learning which gestures elicit trust, which words elicit anger, which silences invite over-explanation. They then use this knowledge to manipulate, to test boundaries, and to create dependency. This is not always conscious. It is the natural cunning of ambition married to opportunity. Notice who subtly pushes emotional buttons, who encourages self-doubt while offering guidance, who cultivates a sense of obligation or gratitude that can later be weaponized. The third warning is the subtle engineering of your psyche, an invisible scaffolding that will support betrayal when the moment is opportune. The divergence between private and public behavior is equally revealing. Observe those who are excessively agreeable in your presence, yet speak differently in absence, who display enthusiasm only when observed, who reserve their true inclinations for moments when they believe no eyes are upon them. These discrepancies are deliberate, yet they cannot be perfectly concealed. Machiavelli understood that duplicity is a natural tool of strategy, yet the human mind leaks, betraying intent through microexpressions, hesitations, and contradictions. The third warning is these discrepancies, faint but telling signals of a mind at work beneath the surface, preparing an eventual strike. Silence, too, can be weaponized. The person who will betray you may withhold information strategically, creating gaps in understanding, ensuring that you operate with partial knowledge. This creates vulnerability without overt action, a form of preparation that is invisible yet lethal. Machiavelli would call this the careful deployment of ignorance, the DE. Liberate cultivation of gaps in awareness to exploit when necessary. Watch for the selective sharing of details, the nuanced withholding of facts, the manner in which information is filtered to suit their emerging agenda. The third warning exists in these absences, in what is not said as much as in what is. Pay attention to alignment with others. The would-be betrayer often begins to cultivate relationships around you, subtly redirecting loyalty, gauging support, and assessing potential leverage points. These alliances may appear casual or coincidental, but they are calculated steps in the architecture of betrayal. Machiavelli would recognize this as the strategic positioning of forces before engagement. The third warning is the quiet network building, the subtle weaving of influence around your periphery, ensuring that when the time comes, they will act from a position of support rather than isolation. Even small gestures carry meaning. A fleeting glance, a hesitant nod, a pause before agreement. These micro-movements are often overlooked, yet they reveal internal conflict and emerging divergence. Those who betray are not always adept at masking the entirety of their intent. The mind is too complex, too alive, to conceal every impulse. The third warning is embedded in these micro-behaviors, waiting for the perceptive observer to discern their pattern and trajectory. Machiavelli would assert that power is preserved not through reaction alone but through anticipation. To see these signals before they fully manifest is to wield the advantage of foresight. The accumulation of these subtle divergences, the contradictions in word and deed, the narrative manipulation, the emotional calibration, the public-private discrepancies, the strategic silences, the alignment with others, and the micro-gestures, is the architecture of betrayal. It grows quietly, often unnoticed, until it becomes unstoppable. The third warning is thus the recognition of pattern, the understanding that small inconsistencies are rarely insignificant, that every shift, every omission, every adjustment is a step along the path toward treachery. Those who see it early gain not only awareness, but opportunity to counter, to preempt, or to maneuver themselves into a position of control before betrayal crystallizes into action. Human ambition, Machiavelli teaches, is relentless and self-serving. The mind plotting betrayal is like a master sculptor, chiseling away at reality until it matches their vision, shaping circumstance and perception to create an inevitability that will appear, to the unsuspecting, as sudden, unavoidable, and cruel. The third warning is the subtle pattern of that chiseling, the divergence between words and deeds, the hidden manipulations, the accumulation of inconsistencies. To perceive it is to glimpse the mind at work, to understand the orchestration before the first overt act of treachery, and to prepare oneself for the reality of human ambition in its most unflinching form. The fourth, silent warning is subtler than contradiction, subtler than misalignment, yet more insidious because it lives in behavior that seems ordinary, even innocuous. It manifests in the quiet shift of initiative, the gradual withdrawal of effort where once there was engagement, the subtle disengagement from shared purpose. Those who intend betrayal rarely abandon the battlefield openly. They retreat invisibly, step by step, masking absence with pretense, cloaking disengagement in civility. The warning exists in this measured retreat, the incomplete tasks, the delayed responses, the avoidance of responsibility for decisions that affect the collective. Machiavelli would describe this as the erosion of influence, the preparation of ground for future action. The fourth warning, the pattern of disengagement, the invisible vacuum that, when left unchecked, creates a void others will fill, often at your expense. Notice the behavior around accountability. Those who will betray you often begin to reframe responsibility, shifting blame subtly, framing outcomes in ways that protect themselves while leaving you exposed. Small instances accumulate, a misstatement they allow to pass uncorrected, a decision they avoid, a subtle distortion of facts. These behaviors are not accidents, they are deliberate positioning, designed to minimize personal risk while maximizing strategic flexibility. The mind-plotting betrayal must secure a safe harbor, a place from which to act without fear of immediate repercussion. The fourth warning exists in this careful calibration of accountability, in the conscious or unconscious strategy of insulating oneself from consequence while observing how events unfold. Observe changes in enthusiasm. The energy once devoted to joint endeavors begins to fluctuate, sometimes imperceptibly. They may participate in planning, but only partially. They may contribute, but only enough to maintain appearances. This is not laziness, it is calculation. Machiavelli would note that ambition is often disguised as compliance. The fourth warning is this subtle withdrawal of vigor, a quiet measurement of engagement that signals a mind plotting a divergence, a silent preparation for action detached from collective loyalty. The manipulation of perception is another layer. A betrayer often seeks to control how others see them, while undermining your position quietly. They may highlight your errors while downplaying your successes, framing narratives so that your triumphs appear as accidents and your missteps as personal failings. This is done with the utmost subtlety, a carefully phrased observation, a casual remark, a suggestion that sows doubt. Why? Doubt, revealing intent. The fourth warning is the recalibration of perception, the slow, methodical shaping of reality to favor their agenda, ensuring that when action occurs, it seems inevitable, almost fated. Watch how they navigate your social sphere. Alliances that once existed between you and others begin to be reinterpreted. They may speak favorably of certain individuals behind your back, cultivating influence, planting seeds of dependency, or subtly redirecting loyalty toward themselves. The betrayer works quietly, building networks that will support future actions while leaving your position vulnerable. This is not always overt. It often appears as harmless conversation, friendly interaction, or casual alignment. The fourth warning is the subtle construction of influence outside of your awareness, the invisible scaffolding for eventual betrayal. And then there is emotional calibration at an advanced level. The betrayer learns not only how to manipulate your feelings, but also how to exploit your reactions strategically. They study what provokes defensiveness, what elicits overconfidence, what triggers hesitation. They use this knowledge to shape your decision-making, often nudging you into choices that serve their interests. Machiavelli understood that knowledge of human behavior is power, and those plotting betrayal wield this power meticulously. The fourth warning is the deployment of this insight to guide you subtly, influencing your thoughts and actions while appearing neutral, supportive, or indifferent. The fifth warning is a step beyond behavior. It is structural, systemic, and embedded in the very patterns of interaction. It appears in the withholding of critical information, the selective sharing of intelligence, the silent exclusion from discussions where decisions are made. The would-be betrayer ensures that your perception is constrained, that your awareness is fragmented, that your ability to act is impaired by gaps in knowledge. This is deliberate, strategic, and invisible to those who trust too readily. The fifth warning is the architecture of omission, the invisible shaping of circumstance to favor their agenda and render you reactive rather than proactive. Observe their engagement with others in moments of opportunity. They may echo your statements, align superficially with your positions, yet act differently when unobserved. They may collect confidences from allies, subtly sowing doubt, reshaping perception, and expanding their leverage. The fifth warning is the silent orchestration of networks, the careful positioning of relationships, the creation of influence that operates outside your direct oversight. Machiavelli would see this as the preparation of forces before confrontation, the gathering of tools, the mapping of advantage, the silent construction of power. Even loyalty expressed in words can be weaponized. They may speak of alignment, commitment, and fidelity, yet each word is calibrated, each promise measured against opportunity. The fifth warning is the divergence between verbal assurance and actual intent. Observe how these words match or fail to match actions over time. The pattern is unmistakable to the attentive observer. A mind preparing to betray will reveal itself in the measured incongruities between speech and behavior, in the subtle adjustments that accumulate into inevitable divergence. Notice the timing of their involvement. They participate when it serves them, withdraw when it risks exposure, and manipulate events to maximize personal gain. This temporal strategy is rarely conscious to outsiders, yet it is instinctual to those attuned to self-interest and ambition. The fifth warning is the invisible choreography of engagement and withdrawal, the orchestration of presence, absence designed to optimize advantage and minimize vulnerability. The fourth and fifth warnings, together, form a lattice of silent signals: withdrawal of initiative, manipulation of perception, calibration of emotion, construction of influence, selective withholding of information, and temporal orchestration of engagement. They are subtle, nearly invisible, yet unmistakable to the perceptive mind. Machiavelli understood that the mind plotting betrayal is methodical, patient, and adaptive. It does not announce itself. It reveals itself gradually, through patterns, contradictions, omissions, and calibrations. Those who observe and interpret these signals gain a profound advantage: the ability to anticipate, prepare, and counteract, to move ahead of the inevitable strike, and to turn the architecture of betrayal into a map of survival and power. The sixth silent warning is often imperceptible, woven into the rhythm of interaction, the cadence of attention, the subtleties of engagement. It emerges in the way someone begins to prioritize themselves over shared purpose, not abruptly, not with overt rebellion, but incrementally, almost imperceptibly. Tasks once undertaken with zeal are delayed or deferred. Advice once freely given is now measured, filtered, calculated. The betrayer begins to test boundaries, to explore which lines can be crossed without detection, to determine the elasticity of trust and the thresholds of oversight. Machiavelli would observe that human ambition is naturally opportunistic. The mind bent on betrayal seeks to exploit openings quietly, to probe weaknesses subtly, and to measure reactions before committing to decisive action. The sixth warning is the gradual self-prioritization that signals an emerging divergence between presented loyalty and private intent. Observe the micro-decisions. They choose when to support and when to abstain, when to intervene and when to observe silently. Their involvement becomes opportunistic, appearing when it benefits them most, disappearing when it exposes them to risk or effort. This is not laziness, it is strategic, a careful allocation of energy to maximize advantage while minimizing exposure. The sixth warning is the subtle realignment of effort, a quiet calibration of presence, an invisible mapping of opportunity against personal gain. Machiavelli would remind us that those who act strategically never expend themselves unnecessarily. The betrayer conserves force, positioning for the moment when action will yield maximum effect. Attention to your vulnerabilities becomes more acute. The betrayer observes the moments when your focus lapses, when emotion clouds judgment, when fatigue or distraction weakens your perception. They catalog these lapses, filing them mentally, noting the exact timing, the triggers, the environmental conditions. This intelligence is silent, hidden, yet invaluable to the mind preparing to betray. The sixth warning is the systematic observation of weaknesses, the quiet study of patterns, and the meticulous preparation for future exploitation. To ignore it is to leave yourself exposed. To perceive it is to gain the first layer of defense against the inevitability of ambition, unrestrained by loyalty. Social positioning is refined. They begin to align subtly with influential figures, to cultivate allies outside your immediate awareness, to establish trust with others in ways that enhance their leverage. They measure how much influence can be claimed without arousing suspicion, how networks can be built quietly to serve their future needs. The sixth warning is the silent construction of relational advantage, the preparation of alliances that will support action when loyalty fractures and opportunity manifests. Machiavelli would recognize this as a hallmark of calculated strategy, an invisible prelude to confrontation or betrayal. Then comes the final, seventh silent warning, the most chilling of all, a subtle shift in integrity, a moral elasticity that allows self-interest to override principle without immediate exposure. It is the quiet rationalization of selective deception, the willingness to manipulate truth, emotions, and perception to serve personal gain. This warning is most dangerous because it is invisible to those who assume consistency in character. It manifests not in a single act, but as a pattern of minor transgressions, each seemingly inconsequential, each building upon the last until the foundation of trust is eroded completely. The seventh warning is the visible shape of invisible ambition, the internal recalibration of ethics, the readiness to exploit, the silent alignment of all behaviors towards self-advantage. Notice how they cultivate dependence and expectation. They create circumstances in which their absence or action carries weight, subtly shaping perception so that when betrayal arrives, it is not only possible but expected, almost inevitable. They have positioned themselves to be indispensable, or at least influential enough, to control outcomes from the shadows. This orchestration is the apex of Machiavellian observation, the understanding that influence, when invisibly wielded, is more potent than force, and the betrayer who controls perception controls inevitability. The seventh warning is embedded in this manipulation of indispensability, the quiet elevation of self relative to others while maintaining the illusion of loyalty. Even subtle expressions reveal intent, a flicker of hesitation, a pause before agreement, a micro shift in gaze. All are indicators that internal alignment has diverged from external presentation. Those who betray do not need grand gestures, small signals accumulate, patterns emerge, and awareness is the only shield against eventual action. Machiavelli would assert that the perceptive mind reads these indicators as easily as a general reads a map of the battlefield. Positions, movements, and intentions become legible through careful observation. The seventh warning is written not in overt conflict, but in the invisible adjustments of behavior, thought, and relational strategy. The accumulation of all seven silent warnings forms a lattice of psychological insight, the first tremor in attention and perception, the recalibration of priorities, the divergence between word and deed, the quiet withdrawal of effort, the architecture of omission, the opportunistic self-prioritization, and finally, the moral elasticity that allows action without scruple. These warnings are imperceptible to the inattentive, yet unmistakable to the mind attuned to the subtle currents of ambition. Machiavelli understood that human nature is inherently self-serving, that betrayal is an ever-present possibility, and that foresight, observation, and interpretation of subtle cues are the tools that preserve advantage and ensure survival. By recognizing these signals early, by mapping the invisible patterns of intent, one gains not merely the ability to defend, but the capacity to anticipate, preempt, and maneuver strategically. The mind trained to perceive betrayal sees the invisible architecture, understands the trajectory of intent, and positions itself to act before the threat becomes tangible. Every hesitation, every omission, every recalibration of loyalty is legible to those willing to observe deeply, to perceive without distraction, to interpret without bias. These seven warnings, when read correctly, illuminate the hidden battlefield that surrounds every relationship, every alliance, every interaction where trust is assumed but never guaranteed. Human behavior, ambition, and desire are intertwined in a theater of perpetual tension. Machiavelli teaches that understanding these currents is essential. The betrayals of human nature are rarely sudden. They are cultivated, orchestrated, and executed with patience and subtlety. To recognize them is to gain power. To ignore them is to court ruin. The perceptive mind does not wait for betrayal to announce itself. It sees the tremors, the shifts, the micro-movements, and prepares accordingly. Awareness itself becomes a shield, perception a weapon, and foresight the ultimate form of advantage. You now stand at the precipice of understanding. 7 silent warnings have been unveiled, each one a tremor in the invisible architecture of human ambition, each one a signpost in the theater of loyalty and treachery. You have learned to see the subtle shifts of attention, the recalibration of priorities, the divergence of words and deeds, the quiet withdrawal of effort, the architecture of omission, the opportunistic self-prioritization, and the moral elasticity that allows betrayal to unfold with calculated precision. The knowledge itself is intoxicating, yet dangerous. To perceive the mind plotting against you is not merely to survive, it is to wield foresight as a weapon, to navigate the currents of human desire with clarity and purpose, to step into the theater of strategy, where most stumble blindly. And yet, the true test lies not in recognition, but in action. Observing betrayal without responding is a dangerous indulgence. The perceptive mind must convert awareness into strategy, subtlety into preemption, insight into movement. Those who wait passively for betrayal to announce itself are already at a disadvantage. Machiavelli's insight is ruthless. Knowledge without application is impotent. You must move, yet with the discretion of a shadow, the patience of a predator, and the precision of a tactician. Every decision, every interaction, every observation becomes part of a larger calculation, a sequence designed to secure advantage, to protect what is yours, and to expose the intentions of those who would deceive you. Begin by observing relentlessly. Train yourself to detect inconsistencies in speech, hesitation in action, and the invisible shifts of loyalty. Map the networks of influence around you, understand the subtle alliances forming in the periphery, and anticipate the movement of ambition before it manifests. Machiavelli understood that the mind capable of perceiving treachery before it acts holds power over both circumstance and adversary. Knowledge is the blade, foresight the shield, and perception the battlefield upon which strategy is executed. Control the flow of information. Those who betray often exploit ignorance, gaps, and ambiguity to gain leverage. Learn to filter, to observe, to withhold, and to measure the effects of revelation. Information is currency in the war of minds, and the perceptive strategist uses it as both bait and barrier, disarming potential threats before they strike. The silent manipulations of others are only dangerous if left unchecked. When countered with insight and calculated deployment of your own intelligence, they become tools to reveal motive, to unmask intent, and to reclaim advantage. Cultivate independence of thought and emotional resilience. Betrayal thrives on manipulation, dependency, and reaction. To anticipate betrayal, you must be immune to its provocations, unmoved by feigned loyalty or subtle flattery, and guided by analysis rather than impulse. Machiavelli would assert that the emotionally uncalibrated mind is a prey, the strategically inattentive mind is a victim. Observe without attachment, engage without blind trust, and act with decisive clarity when patterns converge into actionable insight. Prepare contingencies. The betrayer calculates positions and executes with precision. You must do the same. Anticipate scenarios, map outcomes, and develop responses before the first act of treachery occurs. Machiavelli understood that foresight is a form of power. Those who see danger before it strikes can turn potential disaster into opportunity, potential attack into decisive advantage. The 7 silent warnings are your guides, your intelligence, your prelude to action. Use them to navigate relationships with clarity, to discern intentions before they crystallize, and to transform perception into power. And finally, act when the time is right. The perceptive mind does not act rashly. It does not confront openly unless advantage is assured. It moves with patience, with subtlety, with precision. Those who betray can be neutralized, redirected, or exposed, not through impulsive retaliation, but through calculated maneuver, strategic revelation, and decisive positioning. Machiavelli teaches that the ultimate mastery of human behavior is not merely awareness but control, the ability to shape outcomes, to manipulate perception, and to wield foresight as a weapon stronger than brute force. Now, take this knowledge and let it transform you. Step into the mind of strategy and understand that betrayal is neither rare nor shameful. It is human, inevitable, and observable. Allow these 7 silent warnings to sharpen your perception, to temper your decisions, and to forge your intuition into a weapon of survival and dominance. Let the subtle tremors of human intent guide your vigilance. Let awareness become instinct, insight become preemption, and observation become control. You are no longer blind to the currents that surround you. You now see the architecture of betrayal, the invisible scaffolding of ambition, the silent orchestration of human desire, and with this sight comes responsibility, the responsibility to move decisively, to act strategically, and to claim the advantage that others, unaware, have relinquished to those who see and anticipate. The stage is set, the players are in motion, and the invisible forces of human nature are at work. Now step forward with clarity, with resolve, and with unflinching purpose. Do not wait for the betrayal to strike. See it, anticipate it, and act in a manner that ensures survival, mastery, and supremacy. Let the 7 silent warnings be your guide through the treacherous landscapes of human ambition. Let them sharpen your mind, steel your will, and empower you to navigate a world where loyalty is conditional, trust is fragile, and power belongs to those who understand the patterns invisible to others. And as you move through this world, remember, those who observe without fear, who calculate without hesitation, who act with precision, are the ones who survive when others fall. Those who embrace the lessons of perception, anticipation, and strategic mastery hold the ultimate advantage. The silent warnings are not merely signs, they are keys, maps, and weapons. Take them, wield them, and let the shadows of betrayal illuminate the path to your dominance. Let every subtle tremor, every hesitation, every divergence of loyalty guide you to a state of unassailable awareness. Step forward now sharp. Led by knowledge, armored with insight, and ready to act. See the invisible currents, anticipate the inevitable strikes, and move with precision. Let the world reveal its hidden strategies to you, and in that revelation, claim the mastery that is reserved only for those willing to perceive the unseen, understand the unspoken, and wield the subtle truths of human nature with unrelenting clarity and power. The time for passive observation has ended. Act with wisdom, with resolve, and with the unflinching courage of one who understands the silent machinery of betrayal, and wields that understanding as the ultimate instrument of survival and supremacy.